How Mad Max Fury Road was filmed. Judging by the name, in a mental institution. Shooting of this film was delayed more than 10 years because of a series of challenges and setbacks, and the performers of the lead roles clashed with the director, not understanding his ideas. But in the end, the film surpassed all expectations, receiving widespread recognition and became one of the greatest films of the decade. Movies Inside Out presents Mad Max Fury Road is a 2015 post-apocalyptic action film that became the fourth installment in the franchise about the iconic character Max Rockatansky. Why the crew needed security guards, why the director didn't want a male to do the editing, and how the actors achieved the most realistic performance. You'll learn about this and so much more from our new video. So, let's begin. The creation story. The story of the movie Mad Max Fury Road began back in 1987, when the writer, director, and producer George Miller had the idea to return to his franchise and make a new Mad Max, the basis of which would be endless chases. The famous film series about Max Rockatansky was born back in 1979, when Mad Max starring Mel Gibson was released, after which in 1981 and in 1985 they released the sequels Mad Max 2 Road Warrior and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. However, in 1987, Miller's idea didn't get any traction, and he returned to it only in 1998. About a year later, while traveling from Los Angeles to Australia, Miller came up with the basis for the future plot. Violent marauders would fight not for oil, but for people. Before starting to write the script, Miller began working with 5 artists on detailed storyboards, and they ended up creating about 3,500 drawings, which almost matched the number of editing shots in the final movie. And because the creator of the film wanted it to consist of continuous action, he wrote relatively little dialogue, choosing to focus on the visuals. George Miller worked on the script with Nico Lathris and comic book creator Brendan McCarthy, who also developed the identities of many of the characters and the design of some of the vehicles. In the early 2000s, 20th Century Fox Studios began production on a new installment of the franchise. They planned to have Mel Gibson reprise the role of Max Rockatansky, and Sigourney Weaver was considered for the role of Furiosa, which was suggested by Gibson himself.
That's bait.
However, the filming had to be postponed indefinitely because of the tragic events of 2001 and a difficult political situation that led to a change in the Australian dollar's exchange rate, because of which the budget of the movie significantly increased. But the problems didn't end there. Tightened travel and transportation restrictions in the lead-up to the war in Iraq made it difficult to organize the main filming location in Namibia. Then Miller temporarily abandoned Max and began work on the animated comedy Happy Feet, released in 2006. By the way, interestingly enough, Miller, who directed such a violent franchise as Mad Max,
I am the man who grabs the sun, riding to Valhalla!
also directed 3 cute family-friendly movies, Babe, Pig in the City, and 2 parts of the animated film Happy Feet. And Fury Road became Miller's first R-rated movie since 1987's The Witches of Eastwick. That same year, 2006, Miller returned to Fury Road, but now he imagined the movie without Gibson, as the latter was no longer young enough to play Max and was more busy directing his own films. Only in May 2009, it was reported that the creators of the movie are searching for filming locations for the ill-fated Mad Max. In addition, at the time, the project went from Fox to Warner Brothers, and work on it finally got underway more intensely. Casting. In October 2009, Tom Hardy began negotiations to play Max. Aside from him, Armie Hammer and Jeremy Renner were also major contenders for the role of Max, and at various stages of the multi-year development, Brad Pitt, Johnny Depp, Michael Fassbender, Michael Biehn, Heath Ledger, Eric Bana, and even Eminem were considered for it. In June 2010, Hardy officially confirmed his involvement in the project, and before accepting the iconic role, the actor discussed the decision with Gibson, who gave him his blessing. Funnily enough, Tom Hardy had a dog named Max, who got his name after that same movie character. In 2009, they announced that Charlize Theron would play Furiosa. Theron revealed that she grew up on the Mad Max movies and that she was overjoyed to get a role in the new movie of the franchise. By the way, originally her character wore long hair and her face was decorated with African tribal-style tattoos, but the actress found this look impractical, and she convinced the director to make Furiosa more androgynous. And since Theron decided to shave her head for the role, she had to wear a wig while filming A Million Ways to Die in the West. However, Theron wasn't the only contender either. At various times, the role of Furiosa could have gone to Uma Thurman, Bridget Moynihan, Monica Bellucci, Angelina Jolie, Jessica Chastain, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Ruth Negga, and Gal Gadot. At the time, there were rumors that Mel Gibson would appear in a cameo as a drifter, but Miller denied them, though he admitted it would be very fun. The role of Immortan Joe was given to Hugh Keys-Byrne, who also played the main villain in the 1979 movie. His role in Fury Road was the last for the actor. He passed away in 2020. Quentin Kinahan, who got the role of Corpus Colossus, was a physically impaired man who suffered from osteogenesis imperfecta, a genetic disorder also known as brittle bone disease. Casting for the roles of Immortan Joe's wives went on for over 3 years, and during that period, Jennifer Lawrence, Rihanna, and Margot Robbie could have become part of the cast. Riley Keough, who played Capable, said that auditioning for the role in Mad Max was very unconventional. Instead of reading the script, she instead just improvised with the other actresses. Zoe Kravitz, who played Toast the Knowing, said that during her audition, she was just locked in a room and told to read the script that she thought looked like a drawn-out comic book. The filming process. In 2009, George Miller planned the shooting of Fury Road to begin in Broken Hill, Australia in August 2010 and premiere in 2012. However, the film kept on suffering setbacks. First, the shooting was postponed to November 10, and after unexpectedly heavy rains caused wildflowers to grow in the desert around Broken Hill, the scenery was obviously not suitable for the movie. The shooting was postponed to November 11 and finally started only in July 2012 in Namibia. Apart from Brendan McCarthy, the cars were designed by artists Colin Gibson and Peter Pound. Some vehicles were built back in 2003, but despite this, they remained fully functional. They designed 80 cars for the movie and built around 130 as they needed some of them in multiple copies. Interestingly enough, of all the cars, only 15 survived to the end of the filming. By the way, in order to transport all the cars from Australia to Namibia, they allocated $2 million from the budget to hire a cargo ship. The design of the Gigahorse car that Immortan Joe drove was meant to symbolize the power and status the character possessed. The Gigahorse could go up to 75 miles per hour, and its sound could be heard many miles away. And the unique tracked vehicle, the Peacemaker, driven by the chief gunner, was considered the most dangerous and unpredictable vehicle on the set. The car had serious problems with the brakes and engine cooling, and to make it suitable for filming, these systems had to be redesigned more than once. By the way, by the end of filming, the Peacemaker was also wrecked. More than 80% of the special effects in the movie were practical, including stunts, makeup, and sets. CGI was used mainly to enhance Namibia's scenery, refine stunts, and create Furiosa's prosthetic left arm in place of her real one. Even the older actresses who played members of the Vuvalini tribe performed many of the stunts themselves, and for the more difficult and dangerous scenes, they hired more than 150 stuntmen, including Cirque du Soleil performers and Olympic athletes. Many of the cast and crew members were victims of muggings and thefts while living in the closest desert town. The producers even had to bring in a team of former bodyguards and members of the Special Air Service for protection. By the way, despite the fact that the filming took place in the desert, it turned out to be much cooler than one could assume, and Riley Keough even managed to catch a cold. By the way, working on the movie wasn't hard on Keough alone. According to the actors, after each day of grueling filming, their faces had to be washed clean of a dense layer of sand, and that was the case for 9 months for 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. However, Abby Lee, who played the Dag, felt that the exhaustion made their performance more realistic. Because of difficult weather conditions, the director was unable to be near the actors and directed the shooting looking into the monitors in a special tent. Miller also paid a lot of attention to the visuals of the film. He decided to make the film as colorful as possible to make it stand out from other dystopian post-apocalyptic films. At the same time, the original concept of the movie was black and white, but the producers were strongly against the idea, believing that it would scare off the audience. Though a monochrome version was still released for particular connoisseurs and even went into limited release. Ask the editor to put a filter on and sell people the same movie twice. It's so Hollywood. By the way, our next video will be about the black and white version of the movie. The Citadel, as it appeared on the screen, did not exist in real life. It was created using a combination of photographs of suitable mountain elevations in Namibia, Jordan, and Australia, and visual effects developed by Illura Studios, shaping entirely new colors, textures, and geometry of the rocks. In the scenes where Immortan Joe addresses the people and opens the water pipes, most of the crowd and water flows have been digitally added. Creating the toxic storm required original footage of cars in the desert, overlaid with various visual effects, including complex textures and multiple layers of digital dust. The scene could have been created on the computer from start to finish, but Miller wanted to use as much real footage as possible. By the way, originally there were also tornadoes in this scene, but they looked too unnatural and they decided to replace them with a dust storm. The canyon, on the other hand, did exist in reality, but it too had to be tweaked a bit, making it taller and more pointy. They also found a suitable old quarry in the desert. The team was allowed to blow it up, and the real explosion became the basis for the final shots. Night scenes were shot in bright daylight and later color corrected. The team used low exposure to get the best possible shoots. Shooting night scenes in the daytime was very unusual for the crew members, but during the test shots, everyone realized the result was excellent. The explosion for the final scene was shot live in the desert, and the other cars and Max were added to the frame later. The car was blown up using gas canisters, and the scene was so difficult and dangerous that it was filmed remotely. The explosion itself was very bright and large, and there was almost no need to edit it. Furiosa's prosthetic was also digital. On set, Charlize Theron wore a green cast that immobilized her arm, and instead the team needed to create a fairly realistic but not too off-putting stump and prosthetic. And with that same cast, Theron once accidentally broke Tom Hardy's nose. By the way, the actors did not get along on the set, and according to the actress, drove each other crazy. What else could you expect from a movie with the word "mad" in the title? The work on the sky was no less painstaking, as it was very unpredictable in the desert terrain. It was foggy in the mornings, and by evening the sky was a perfect blue. However, the shooting continued throughout the day, and special effects specialists had to process the sky in almost all scenes, making it stable and somewhat post-apocalyptic. The director also asked cameraman John Scale to try to keep the main actor in the center of the frame so that the audience wouldn't have to search for him on the screen because of the fast editing. By the way, Scale, having been retired for a few years now, got back in action specifically to work on Mad Max. Despite the fact that Mad Max is not a very romantic movie, two couples were formed on the set, who later got married. In 2013, understudies of Theron and Hardy, Dana and Dane Grant, became husband and wife, and in 2015, stuntman Ben Smith Peterson and Riley Keough became a family. And Nicholas Hoult, who played Nux, took knitting lessons from the makeup artist between shoots. Curiously, Max Rockatansky has only 52 lines, and the names of many characters, as in the old trilogy, are never uttered during the course of the action and are only mentioned in the credits. Even the main character's last name can be heard for the first time only in this movie.
Max. My name is Max.
Incidentally, almost all dialogue was dubbed during post-production, as the original audio recordings from the set were unusable due to background noise from wind and engines. This process is called voiceover, when the actors dub themselves in post-production. For an outsider, it often resembles the process of exorcising demons from the body. Here's Hugh Jackman doing it. Corpus Colossus was originally supposed to be killed at the end of the movie, and the ending with his death was shot in 10 takes, but then the director decided that he didn't want the character dead. The scene was reshot the next day, and Corpus ended up being the only surviving member of Immortan Joe's family. The movie also has references to the original film. For example, in the scene where Max abruptly wakes up in the car, the last frame of his flashback is a close-up of the eyes popping out of the eye sockets from the toe cutter murder scene. And during the final battle, one of Immortan Joe's minions scares Furiosa with the exact same hiss as the toe cutter in the 1979 film. It's also interesting that the jacket Hardy wears in the movie is a perfect replica of the one worn by Mel Gibson in the second and third films of the trilogy. And the crossed belts worn by Valkyrie, played by Megan Gale, are the same belts worn by Max in the third installment. The nylon paracord bracelet that Max wears is a personal item of Tom Hardy, and the baton of Immortan Joe belonged to Hugh Caius Burns' mother-in-law. It was given to her as a gift during World War II, and after her death it was lying around and Hugh thought it would be just right for the movie. Editor Margaret Sixel, who is also Miller's wife, had to create the movie from 470 hours of footage that took 3 months to process. Curiously, when Sixel asked her husband why he decided to have her do the editing since she had never worked on an action movie before, he replied that if a male had edited it, the movie would have looked like any other action flick. By the way, Fury Road, with a 2-hour runtime, became the longest movie of the franchise. There is a curious theory that Max in Fury Road is the Pharaoh kid from the second movie, as he has a music box similar to the one Max gives to the kid. However, the comic book series of the same name, written by Miller, claims that Tom Hardy's Max is the same character as Mel Gibson's Max. Also, many believe that the girl Max sees in his visions is his daughter. However, in the comic book, she gets hit by several cars in the desert and Max's daughter was killed before the war. The end credits of the film have a memorial dedication that reads Lance Allen Moore II, May 24, 1987 to March 10, 2015. Moore was a fan of the Mad Max franchise and died in a motorcycle accident near the location where the second installment was filmed. Movie mistakes and errors. As with any movie, there are plenty of minor errors and major mistakes to be found in Mad Max. Let's take a look at some of them. At the beginning of the movie, the cars only make sounds when they appear in the frame. Max gets a full back tattoo, but when he runs away, his shirt is completely dry and clean, even though the fresh tattoo must have stained it with blood. The escape scene is clearly sped up, and the blood on Max's forehead appears and disappears. The hook moves gently before he exits the cave, but before Max jumps on it, it somehow stops for his convenience. Joe blasts the water under extreme pressure, but after a couple of seconds, the pressure drops drastically. It's like he's watering his lawn. The point of having this door is unclear when it opens with just a simple turn of a lever, and anyone can do that, as well as breaking the glass ceiling in the room. A tube of blood threaded through a chain keeps disappearing and reappearing in different shots. Buzzard's car catches up with the truck, but in the next shot, it suddenly overtakes it by a few dozen yards. In the same scene, we see a perfectly clear sky as suddenly out of nowhere, a storm appears in front of the characters. The nautical compass on Immortan Joe's dashboard clicks as it spins, though in reality it makes no sound. You can also see how the artificial belly has these strange folds. Furiosa's forehead was stained with fuel oil. It gets much cleaner in the middle of the fight, and by the end, the dirt is all but gone, as is the blood around her mouth and nose, by the way. Toast, the knowing, reports that the fighters from the city are coming for them, but she has no way of knowing this, as they appear from behind the hill only a few seconds after she says so. At this point, the hose is disconnected from the tank, but a couple seconds later, it is back in place. Nux falls out the car window headfirst, but lands on his back when the camera angle changes. Besides, if a person hits the sand with tremendous force, they would probably break several bones and wouldn't be able to get up and run right away. When Nux accidentally gets caught on the grate, you can see that the chain was pre-tied to it. Upon entering the archway, the flag on the truck breaks off, but after a short time, it goes back in place as if nothing happened. During the conversation with Capable, you can see black dots on Nux's tumors, but they're nowhere to be found before or after. Toast the Knowing says that there are 4 rounds left, and after one shot, she warns Max that there are only 2 rounds left.
You've got 2 left!
Even though it should have been 3. If in real life Max had let Furiosa fire the rifle leaning against his shoulder, he would have permanently lost his hearing. Furiosa says that they have enough fuel for another 160 days of motorcycle travel. However, there is no way they could transport around 2,600 gallons of gasoline. Besides, they'd probably need a couple tons of water and food, and it is impossible to transport all of that away on motorcycles by any stretch. Moreover, in 160 days of driving at a relatively easy pace, they would have covered the length of Australia twice. Then the characters decide to capture the Citadel, trapping the fighters in the mountains. However, the fighters would surely escape the trap after a while and their plan would fail. Furiosa claims that the truck's engine died, but if that were really the case, there's no way Nux could have fixed it on the fly in a couple of minutes. A polecat strikes the woman in the neck with a chainsaw, and later she has only a small scratch. And the woman not only survives, but is also able to stab the enemy with a bullet with amazing strength and accuracy. Valkyrie shoots the windshield of Immortan Joe's car several times, but soon the bullet marks disappear and then reappear. Furiosa pulls the knife out of her wound and throws it to the floor, but after a while it magically reappears in her side. The People Eater's car explodes as soon as Max jumps out of it, but then it becomes perfectly intact only to explode again. It's odd that at the beginning of the movie, Joe is perfectly comfortable wearing the mask like a respirator, but at the end it rips half his face off. Joe's body falls to the ground parallel to the car, but in the next shot, it is arranged perpendicularly. And when people run up to it, it's obvious that there's no body there, just clothes spread out on the sands. Rictus stands in the fire, but because the flames that rise up his legs are digital, they don't burn him at all. It's also amazing how throughout the movie, the engines of the cars without any air filtration whatsoever run smoothly in the dust storms and almost never fail. In some scenes, the characters grab onto the exhaust pipe, but they heat up to over 340 degrees Fahrenheit, so holding onto them with bare hands would be impossible. Maybe you've noticed other inaccuracies in the movie? Let us know in the comments. Deleted scenes. It is known that the original version of the movie was about 4 hours long. However, according to Miller, most of the cuts were made to scenes that did make it into the final cut. But the creators also had to cut a few standalone episodes, which were later released on Blu-ray. So, in one of the most interesting scenes, a woman offers one of Immortan Joe's minions her newborn baby and asks him to make it into a half-life warrior. However, after discovering mutations on the child's body, the man returns it to the mother, stating that it will not last long. Then she drops the infant and offers herself as a source of valuable milk. Perhaps this episode was cut to avoid accusations of showing child abuse. Margaret Sixel said that it was very difficult for her to pick suitable takes with Tom Hardy because of his inappropriate approach to some scenes. He often tried to play comedy when the situation required him to be serious. In the original movie, Valkyrie appears nude on screen, but in some international versions, this scene has been altered. They added underwear to the character to avoid getting a stricter age rating. Worldwide recognition. Both the R-rated and PG-13 versions were filmed and edited for test screenings, and eventually Warner Brothers executives decided to release the more adult-oriented version. Interestingly enough, at a press conference in Cannes, where the film was shown out of competition on May 14, 2015, Tom Hardy apologized to George Miller for the difficulties that arose between them during filming. The actor admitted that he didn't understand the director's ideas, often argued with him, and was often late to the set. But after seeing the finished film, he realized how brilliant Miller is. By the way, Charlize Theron also didn't really like Miller's approach to filming, which resulted in them shooting a 5-minute scene for several weeks, but she later realized that the director was right. Mel Gibson was also at the premiere in Cannes and praised Miller's new film. The list of the movie's fans also included Bong Joon-ho, the director of Parasite, who said the movie brought him to tears, and Quentin Tarantino, who at first refused to watch Mad Max without Mel Gibson. On May 15, 2015, Fury Road was released worldwide and eventually earned $154.3 million in the US and Canada and $226.1 million internationally. The total box office receipts were $380.4 million with a production budget of about $150 million. Despite the apparent profit, The Hollywood Reporter estimated that the studio suffered a loss of about $20 to $40 million. The new Mad Max impressed the vast majority of movie critics, and many of them called the film one of the greatest action movies of all time, praising it for the amazing depth of the narrative and exciting action, thanks to which the cult franchise got a second wind. Fury Road became the franchise's first film to be nominated for an Oscar, and not just nominated, it also earned a total of 6 awards out of 10, breaking the record for the most wins among Australian films. And thus, the members of the American Film Academy awarded the movie for the Best Costume Design, Best Sound Mixing, Best Film Editing, Best Sound Editing, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, as well as Best Production Design. The film was also awarded by the British Academy, earning awards for Best Costume Design, Best Makeup and Hair, Best Editing, and Best Production Design. In addition, the Australian Film Academy awarded the film in 8 categories, including Best Film, Best Direction, Best Cinematography, and Best Original Music Score. Saturn nominated the movie in 8 categories, but only Charlize Theron won as Best Actress, who also earned an MTV Channel Award in a similar category. The Screen Actors Guild Awards awarded the film for Best Stunt Cast, and at the San Sebastian Film Festival, it won the International Film Critics Association Award for Best Film of the Year. The film was also nominated for a Golden Globe in the categories Best Film and Best Director, but lost the awards to its competitors. Even before the film's release, Miller said he had enough story material for 2 additional films and promised to make them if Fury Road was a success. In 2019, it was reported that the director is planning to make 3 films, 2 sequels about Mad Max and 1 prequel about Furiosa. The creators decided to release a film about the youth of a fearless warrior woman first. Furiosa, a Mad Max saga starring Anya Taylor-Joy, premiered on May 23, 2024. What do you like better, the classic trilogy or the modern reboot?